The boy lay motionless on the cold Italian marble floor of the Chen estate in Atherton, California. His small frame trembled against the pristine white surface. His eyes shut tight, one hand clutched to his ear, while the other held something dark, wet, and impossibly strange. The afternoon sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows cast long shadows across the room, making the scene even more surreal. "What did you do to the boy?" Marcus Stone's voice thundered through the vast living room, his hand instinctively moving toward the concealed weapon at his hip. The former FBI agent's eyes were wide with a mixture of shock and accusation as he stared at Michael Torres, who knelt beside the child. Michael's weathered hands shook as he held up his palms in a gesture of innocence. "I didn't hurt him, Mr. Stone. I swear to God I was only trying to help." The sharp click of heels on marble announced Victoria Chen's arrival before she appeared. The youngest female CEO in Silicon Valley, according to Forbes, the woman who had built medtech innovations into a $4 billion empire, burst into the room like a force of nature. Her usually composed face was pale, and in those calculating blue eyes that had stared down Fortune 500 executives there was something new, raw, primal fear. "Oliver!" She rushed to her son's side, her designer dress pooling around her as she dropped to her knees. "What happened to my son?" "I can explain." Michael began, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Please just let me." "You touched my son." Victoria's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, more terrifying than any scream. "You dared to put your hands on him without my permission." Slowly, carefully, Michael opened his calloused palm. Resting inside was something that made everyone in the room instinctively step back. Black glistening under the crystal chandelier's light, about an inch long and still moving. It writhed slowly as if searching for something it had lost. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the sound of Victoria's sharp intake of breath. Then impossibly, a small voice pierced the quiet. "Mom." The word was barely formed, rough and unpracticed, like someone speaking through layers of cotton. But it was unmistakably coming from Oliver Chen, the boy who had been born profoundly deaf, the boy who had never spoken a single word in his 10 years of life. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus Stone stood frozen, his years of training useless in the face of the impossible. And Michael Torres, the maintenance man, who had just changed everything, simply closed his eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks to a God he'd stopped believing in 3 years ago. 6 months earlier, Michael Torres had been a different man, living a different life in Denver, Colorado. He'd had a wife named Sarah, a modest apartment near Denver General Hospital, and a simple dream of raising his son Noah in peace. Sarah was a kindergarten teacher with a laugh that could fill a room and a smile that made even the worst days bearable. They'd met at a charity run for the Children's Hospital where Michael worked as an emergency room nurse. She'd tripped at the starting line, skinning her knee badly, and he'd been the one to bandage her up. "My hero," she'd joked, and somehow, impossibly, she'd meant it. They'd been married 7 years when she decided to take that weekend trip to Aurora with her book club. "Just a Friday night movie premiere," she'd said, kissing him and Noah goodbye. "The new superhero film. You know I can't resist a good action movie." Michael had laughed, told her to have fun, promised to hold down the fort with their 6-year-old son. The call came at 12:38 a.m. "Is this Michael Torres?" The voice on the other end was professionally calm, but Michael, who had made similar calls himself, heard the weight beneath it. "Yes. Sir, I'm calling from Aurora Medical Center. Your wife Sarah was brought in tonight. There's been an incident at the Century 16 Theater." The rest was a blur. The frantic drive to Aurora with Noah asleep in the back seat, the chaos at the hospital, the waiting room filled with sobbing families. The moment a doctor he knew, someone he'd worked alongside for years, took him to a quiet room and said the words that shattered his world. "I'm so sorry, Michael. We did everything we could." 12 dead, 70 injured. Sarah Torres was among the 12. After that, Denver became unbearable. Every street corner held a memory. Every siren made him relive that night. He lasted 3 more months at the hospital before his supervisor, a kind woman named Patricia, pulled him aside. "Michael, you're one of the best nurses we've ever had, but you're not here anymore. You're going through the motions. You need a change for you and for Noah." She was right. Michael sold everything, packed what remained into his 10-year-old Honda Accord, and drove west with Noah until they hit the Pacific Ocean. California was supposed to be a new beginning. No memories on every corner, no pitying looks from people who knew their story. He found work with Precision Property Management, a company that handled maintenance for luxury estates in Silicon Valley. The pay was decent, the health insurance covered Noah, and most importantly, it was work he could do without thinking too much. Fix a broken gate, replace a water heater, update a smart home system. Simple mechanical tasks that didn't require him to care about anyone or anything beyond completing the job. The Chen estate was one of 12 properties on his regular rotation. Perched on 3 acres in Atherton, the most expensive zip code in America, it was a monument to new money and technological ambition. The main house sprawled across 15,000 square feet, all clean lines and walls of glass that offered panoramic views of the San Francisco Bay. The infinity pool seemed to merge with the sky. The 6-car garage housed vehicles worth more than most people's homes. Everything was controlled by an AI system that could anticipate needs before they were expressed. And yet, for all its perfection, the house felt empty. Cold. Like a museum where no one was allowed to touch anything. Michael had been maintaining the property for 3 months before he first saw Oliver Chen. The boy was sitting on the marble steps that led to the second floor, lining up toy cars in perfect, precise rows. Each vehicle exactly 2 inches from the next, all facing the same direction. Michael had raised a hand to wave hello, but the boy didn't look up, didn't react at all. He was completely absorbed in his silent world. Something wrong with the kid? Michael had asked Marcus Stone, who always seemed to materialize whenever anyone got too close to the family's private spaces. Marcus's expression had been carved from granite. That's not your concern. I was just asking. He seems... The boy is deaf, has been since birth, can't hear, can't speak, and it's not something you need to worry about. You're here to fix things, not make friends. The dismissal was clear, but something in Marcus's tone suggested more. A warning, perhaps, or maybe just the weariness of someone who'd had to explain this situation too many times. Michael had nodded and returned to his work, but his chest felt tight. A deaf child in a house full of the latest technology, surrounded by wealth that could buy anything except the one thing he needed most, the ability to hear his mother's voice. Over the following weeks, Michael found himself paying attention to Oliver. Not intrusively, just noticing. The boy was always alone. The household staff all required to know basic sign language as part of their employment contracts, communicated with him only when necessary. They treated him like he was made of glass, fragile and untouchable, or worse, like he was invisible. Michael thought of Noah safe and chattering away at his public school in Sunnyvale. Noah who could hear his father say, "I love you," every night. Noah who had also lost his mother but at least had a world of sounds to fill the silence she'd left behind. One evening, Michael decided to learn sign language. He found YouTube tutorials practiced in front of his bathroom mirror after Noah went to bed. His fingers were clumsy, his movements awkward, but he persisted. The next time he saw Oliver, he signed a simple, "Hello." Oliver's eyes widened in surprise. For a long moment, he just stared. Then slowly, his small hands moved to sign back. "Hello." It was a small gesture, but Michael saw something change in the boy's expression. Recognition. Not of the word, but of the effort. Someone was trying to enter his world rather than forcing him to navigate theirs. After that, it became routine. Every time Michael worked at the estate, he would sign hello to Oliver. Sometimes the boy would show him what he was playing with using gestures and expressions to communicate beyond the formal signs. Michael started leaving small gifts, a smooth stone he'd found that looked like a heart, a paper airplane with surprisingly good aerodynamics, a piece of dark chocolate from the expensive stash the kitchen staff pretended didn't exist. Oliver never said anything, of course, but the gifts always disappeared. And sometimes Michael would find something in return, a drawing left, where he'd been working always of the same subjects, cars, houses, and sometimes 2 stick figures standing together, one tall, one small. Marcus Stone did not approve. "Torres, we need to talk." Marcus intercepted him one afternoon in the hallway leading to the pool house. The former FBI agent moved with the controlled grace of someone who'd been trained to be dangerous, his gray eyes constantly scanning for threats. "Yes, sir. I've noticed you've been interacting with Oliver. I just say hello. Nothing more. That's more than necessary. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a tone that had probably once made suspects confess to crimes they hadn't committed. Do you know what my job is here, Torres? Security. My job is to protect this family from threats both external and internal, from people who might want to hurt them, use them, or exploit their vulnerabilities. Michael held his ground. I'm not a threat to anyone. Everyone's a potential threat until proven otherwise. That's how you keep people safe. Marcus's jaw tightened. The boy is vulnerable. More than you know. Mrs. Chen has spent millions trying to help him. The last thing he needs is false hope from someone who doesn't understand his condition. I'm not giving him false hope. I'm just treating him like a human being. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Not quite anger. Something more complex. You have a son, don't you, Noah? Michael stiffened. How do you know about my son? I run background checks on everyone who enters this property regularly. It's my job. Marcus's expression softened almost imperceptibly. 9 years old, goes to Sunnyvale Elementary, lost his mother 3 years ago. Are you threatening my son? No, Marcus said quickly. I'm reminding you that you have your own child to worry about. Focus on him. Leave Oliver to his family and his specialists. The conversation should have ended there. Michael should have backed down, protected his job, maintained professional distance. But something about Oliver's isolation, his quiet acceptance of a world that had already written him off, wouldn't let Michael walk away. He thought of Sarah, how she'd always said that kindness was never wasted, even when it seemed pointless. The smallest gesture can change someone's entire day, she'd tell her kindergarten students. Maybe even their life. So Michael kept signing hello, kept leaving small gifts, kept treating Oliver like what he was, a 10-year-old boy who happened to be deaf, not a medical case or a problem to be solved. It was a sunny Thursday afternoon in March when everything changed. Michael was replacing filters in the pool house ventilation system when he noticed Oliver sitting by himself on the pool deck. The boy kept touching his left ear, wincing, then pulling his hand away. Then doing it again and again. Michael set down his tools, wiped his hands clean, and approached slowly, making sure to enter Oliver's field of vision so he wouldn't be startled. Hey, he signed. Oliver looked up, attempted a smile that didn't quite mask the discomfort in his eyes. Hi. You okay? Michael signed slowly, making sure Oliver could follow. Oliver hesitated, then shook his head. His next sign took Michael a moment to recognize. Hurt. Where hurt? Oliver pointed to his ear. How long? Michael held up fingers to indicate the question. Oliver raised 5 fingers, then made a sign Michael recognized as days. 5 days. The boy had been in pain for 5 days and no one had noticed. Or worse, no one had thought to investigate. Tell Mom, Michael signed. Oliver shook his head quickly, fear flashing across his features. He signed something complex that Michael couldn't quite follow, then simplified. No doctor, no hospital. They hurt. Michael's heart clenched. Of course. How many procedures had this child endured? How many specialists had poked and prodded, subjected him to tests that probably felt more like torture, to a boy who couldn't understand why they were necessary? Let me look, Michael signed, then pointed to his own eyes and Oliver's ear. I promise no hurt. Oliver studied his face for a long moment. Trust was not something that came easily to a child who'd learned that most adults meant discomfort, even when they claimed to be helping. But something in Michael's expression, perhaps the genuine concern or the memory of all those small kindnesses, made him nod. Michael moved carefully, aware that any sudden movement might spook the boy. Turn head, he signed, then demonstrated. Oliver complied, and the afternoon sun fell directly on his ear. Michael leaned in, squinting. At first he saw nothing unusual. The outer ear looked normal, perhaps slightly reddened. But as his eyes adjusted, he caught a glimpse of something deeper in the ear canal. Something dark. Something that shouldn't be there. He pulled out his phone and activated the flashlight function, angling it to better illuminate the area. What he saw made his breath catch. There was definitely something in there. Black with a surface that seemed to glisten. And unless his eyes were playing tricks on him, it had moved slightly when the light hit it. Michael sat back, his mind racing. During his years as an ER nurse, he'd seen all sorts of foreign objects lodged in ears. Beads, beans, cotton swabs, broken off even small insects. But this looked different, larger, deeper, and it had been there for a while, judging by how settled it appeared. "Wait here," he signed to Oliver, trying to keep his expression calm. He quickly searched his phone for medical articles about foreign bodies and ear canals. The results made his pulse quicken. Foreign body and external auditory canal may cause conductive hearing loss. Long-term presence can lead to infection tissue damage. Cases have been misdiagnosed as sensorineural deafness when conductive causes were not properly investigated. Michael stopped on that last line, reading it again. Could it be possible, could Oliver's deafness, which everyone had accepted as neurological and permanent, actually be caused by something as simple as an obstruction? But how could that be? Victoria Chen had access to the best medical care money could buy. Specialists from around the world had examined Oliver. Surely someone would have noticed. Then he remembered something an old ER attending had once told him. The eyes can't see what the mind doesn't expect. If you go in convinced of a diagnosis, you'll find evidence to support it and ignore everything else. Doctors had been told from the beginning that Oliver had profound sensorineural hearing loss. If early tests had seemed to confirm it, would anyone have done a thorough examination of something as basic as the ear canal? Or would they have jumped straight to advanced imaging, cochlear implants, experimental treatments? Michael looked back at Oliver, who was watching him with a mixture of hope and fear that was heartbreaking on such a young face. He had to make a decision. Tell Victoria and risk Oliver being subjected to another round of medical interventions that terrified him, or try to help himself. He thought of Sarah, of what she would do. The answer was clear. "Do you trust me?" he signed to Oliver. The boy nodded without hesitation. "I'm going to help, but you have to be brave." "Okay." Oliver swallowed hard, then nodded again. Michael was just reaching for his toolkit, where he kept a pair of precision tweezers for electrical work, when he heard the sharp click of heels on stone. "What are you doing to my son?" Victoria Chen stood at the entrance to the pool area, her white designer suit immaculate despite a full day of meetings, her face a mask of controlled fury. Behind her, Marcus Stone had already pulled out his phone, ready to call 911 or private security, or possibly both. Michael raised his hand slowly, the universal gesture of non-threat. "Mrs. Chen, I know how this looks, but please let me explain." "Explain?" Victoria's voice could have frozen water. "Explain why you're alone with my son, why he looks distressed, why you seem to be examining him without permission or medical qualification." "There's something in his ear," Michael said simply. "Something that shouldn't be there. I think it might be why—" "Stop." Victoria moved toward them with predatory grace, her maternal instincts overriding everything else. "Marcus, call the police." "No!" The sharp sound came from Oliver. Not a word, not quite, but a vocal protest that made everyone freeze. Oliver stood up, his small body trembling but determined. He grabbed his mother's hand and signed rapidly, his movements urgent and clear even to Michael's limited understanding. "Ear hurts. Many days. Michael helping. Please, Mom. Please." Victoria looked down at her son, and for the first time since Michael had met her, he saw her armor crack. "You've been in pain. Why didn't you tell me?" Oliver's signs were smaller now, ashamed. "Scared. No more doctors. No more tests. Please." Victoria dropped to her knees, pulling Oliver against her. For a moment, she just held him, her face buried in his hair. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. "There's really something in his ear?" she asked Michael. "Yes, I can see it. Something dark, possibly organic. It's deep in the canal, but—" Michael hesitated, then continued. "Mrs. Chen, I was an ER nurse for 6 years before my wife died. I've removed dozens of foreign bodies from ears. If you'll let me try—" "This is insane," Marcus interjected. "Victoria, we should call Dr. Wells immediately." "No," Oliver signed emphatically. "No, Dr. Wells. Michael. Trust Michael." Victoria looked between her son and Michael, clearly torn between maternal protectiveness and the desperate hope in Oliver's eyes. "If you hurt him," she said quietly, "I will destroy you. I will ensure you never work again, never see your son without supervision. Do you understand?" "I understand," Michael replied. And if I'm not absolutely certain I can do this safely, I'll stop immediately. Victoria stood wiping her eyes with precise movements. Marcus, get the first aid kit, the comprehensive one from the panic room, and call Dr. Wells. Tell him to be on standby but not to come yet. Marcus clearly wanted to protest but knew better than to challenge Victoria when she'd made a decision. He strode off, returning minutes later with a medical kit that probably cost more than Michael's monthly salary. Michael washed his hands thoroughly with antiseptic, then examined the contents of the kit. High-quality instruments, including several types of forceps and extraction tools. He selected the most appropriate one, then knelt beside Oliver again. "This might feel strange," he signed. "Maybe little hurt, but I'll be quick. Breathe deep, okay?" Oliver nodded, his hand finding his mother's and gripping tight. Michael carefully positioned Oliver's head to maximize the light. Using a speculum from the kit to gently widen the ear canal opening, he could now see the object clearly. It was definitely organic, some kind of larva or parasitic organism, black and segmented, approximately 1 centimeter in length. It had attached itself deep in the canal near the eardrum. "Jesus!" Marcus breathed, leaning in to look. "What the hell is that?" "Looks like a botfly larva." Michael set his hands steady despite his racing heart. "Maybe dermastidae. They can survive in ear canals for extended periods, feeding on dead skin cells and secretions." "How long?" Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "Based on the size, could be years." The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. Michael carefully inserted the forceps, moving with the slow precision he'd learned during countless emergency procedures. The trick was to grasp firmly enough to extract, but not so hard as to crush the organism, which could release toxins or cause infection. Oliver whimpered softly but held still, his mother stroking his hair and whispering reassurances. The forceps made contact with the larva, and Michael felt it react, trying to burrow deeper. "Almost there," he murmured, knowing Oliver couldn't hear him, but hoping the tone carried comfort anyway. He adjusted his grip, then pulled with steady, even pressure. The organism resisted, clinging to its decade-long home. Michael maintained the tension, and patient and persistent. Then, with a sensation like pulling a cork from a bottle, it came free. He withdrew the forceps carefully, and there it was, a black, glistening larva still writhing in the grip of the metal instruments. Everyone in the vicinity took an involuntary step back, except for Oliver, who was rubbing his ear with an expression of profound relief. "My God," Victoria breathed. "It's been inside him all this time." Michael deposited the organism into a specimen container from the medical kit. "We'll need to have it properly identified, but yes, this could have been there since he was an infant. If it lodged deep enough near the eardrum, it could have caused complete conductive hearing loss." But the tests," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "The specialists, the scans. They were looking at his brain, his nerves, his cochlea," Michael explained gently. "Once they decided it was sensorineural deafness, they had no reason to check for something this simple. This unusual but simple." Oliver made a sound, a small gasp that drew everyone's attention. His eyes were wide, his hand pressed to the ear Michael had just cleared. He turned his head slowly, as if trying to catch something elusive. Then he looked directly at his mother and opened his mouth. "Mom." The word was rough, unpracticed, formed by vocal cords that had never been properly used. But it was clear, unmistakable, and absolutely impossible. Victoria's legs gave out. She collapsed beside her son, pulling him against her, as sobs racked her body. "Oh my God, Oliver! Oh my God, you can hear me!" Oliver didn't answer with words. Instead, he pressed his hands over both ears, his face scrunching up in distress. "Loud!" He managed the word, barely formed, but comprehensible. "Too loud." Of course, after 10 years of silence, every sound would be overwhelming. The hum of the pool filter, the distant traffic, the wind in the trees, his mother's crying, Marcus's heavy breathing, Michael's own rapid heartbeat that seemed to thunder in his chest. "It's okay," Michael said softly, moving into Oliver's line of sight and signing as he spoke. "The sounds are new. Your brain needs time to learn them. Look at me. Breathe with me." He demonstrated slow, deep breaths, and Oliver mimicked him, his eyes locked on Michael's face, as if it were an anchor in a storm of sensation. Gradually, the panic faded from the boy's expression, replaced by wonder. Your voice, Oliver whispered, the words slurred, but improving with each attempt. I know your voice. Michael's vision blurred. How could you know my voice? Oliver touched his chest right over his heart. Here. I knew it here. Later, Marcus would say he'd never seen anything like it. Victoria would call it a miracle. The news would spread through Silicon Valley like wildfire, sparking debates about medical assumptions and the limitations of technology. But in that moment, by the pool of a mansion in Atherton, there were just three people bound together by an impossible discovery. A man who had lost everything and found purpose in kindness. A woman whose wealth couldn't buy what she needed most. And a boy who had lived in silence for 10 years, only to discover that the key to sound had been there all along, waiting for someone to care enough to look. The revolution that would follow the medical scandal, the thousands of children who would be helped, the love that would grow between two broken families, finding wholeness together, all of that was still to come. For now, there was just Oliver Chen hearing his mother's voice for the first time, and Michael Torres, who had done what million-dollar machines and renowned specialists couldn't. He had simply paid attention to a child in pain. The afternoon sun continued its journey across the California sky, indifferent to the miracle below. But in the Chen estate, the world had fundamentally changed. The silence was broken, and somewhere perhaps Sarah Torres was smiling, knowing that her husband had remembered her most important lesson. Kindness is never wasted, especially when it seems pointless, because sometimes the smallest gesture really can change a life. Sometimes it can even save one. Dr. Harrison Wells arrived at the Chen estate exactly 47 minutes after Marcus Stone's call, his silver Tesla Model S, pulling into the circular driveway with practiced precision. At 58, Wells had the distinguished appearance of someone who had spent decades at the top of his field, silver hair, perfectly styled clothes that whispered rather than shouted their expense, and hands that had performed over 1,000 procedures. He was the chief medical officer of MedTech Innovations, handpicked by Victoria Chen herself from his position as head of neurology at Stanford Medical Center. He entered the house with the confidence of someone who had been summoned to solve yet another crisis, only to stop dead in the doorway of the living room. Oliver Chen was sitting on the cream-colored sofa, wearing noise-canceling headphones and talking. Not signing. Talking. Hello, Dr. Wells. The boy said, his voice uncertain but unmistakably real. I can hear you now. The medical bag slipped from Wells' fingers, hitting the marble floor with a dull thud that made Oliver flinch even through the headphones. This is impossible, Wells said, his voice barely above a whisper. Oliver has profound sensorineural hearing loss. The auditory nerves don't function. We've run every test. Victoria stood up from beside her son, and in her hand was a clear specimen container. Inside, the black larva continued its slow, writhing movement. This was in my son's ear, she said, her tone deceptively calm. This living thing was inside my child for 10 years, and not one of your specialists found it. Wells took the container with trembling hands, holding it up to the light. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally horror. Cochleomya hominivores, he breathed. A New World screwworm fly larva. But these are incredibly rare in California. How could it have... I don't care what it's called, Victoria interrupted. I care about why no one found it. Why my son suffered in silence for a decade, while you ran test after test, procedure after procedure, and never once thought to look in his ear with a simple otoscope. Wells set the container down on the coffee table and sank into a chair, his composure crumbling. The initial diagnosis was made when Oliver was 6 months old. The auditory brainstem response test showed no neural activity. The MRI revealed underdevelopment in the auditory cortex. Everything pointed to congenital sensorineural deafness. Everything except the actual cause, Michael said quietly from his position near the window. He had been trying to stay out of the confrontation, but the doctor's attempts at justification were too much to bear. Wells turned to look at him properly for the first time. And you are the maintenance man who did your job, Marcus said dryly, earning a sharp look from Victoria. Michael Torres, Michael introduced himself, former ER nurse at Denver General. I've extracted foreign bodies from ears hundreds of times. It's often the first thing we check when a child presents with hearing issues. But the tests, Wells began, the tests showed what you expected them to show, Michael continued. The larva created complete conductive hearing loss. Without sound reaching the inner ear for 10 years, of course, the auditory cortex would show underdevelopment. It's like a muscle that's never been used. But that doesn't mean it couldn't function once the obstruction was removed. Wells was silent for a long moment, then asked, "How long before we know if the hearing restoration is permanent?" "It is permanent," Oliver said suddenly, his voice stronger now. "I can hear everything. The air conditioner, the clock. Your heart beating really fast, Dr. Wells. Are you scared?" The innocence of the question made it even more devastating. Wells rubbed his face with both hands. "I'm processing, Oliver. This changes everything we thought we knew about your condition." "Pull up his medical records," Victoria ordered Marcus. "All of them. I want to see every complaint, every symptom that was dismissed." Marcus retrieved his tablet and accessed the comprehensive medical database Victoria had insisted on maintaining. His expression darkened as he scrolled through the years of entries. "Here," he said, turning the screen toward Victoria. "Age 3. Patient exhibits signs of ear discomfort repeatedly touching left ear. Dismissed as behavioral tic. Age 4. Mother reports child seems to be in pain, holding ear. Attributed to frustration from communication barriers. Age 5. Ear pulling persists. Noted but no action taken." "Continue," Victoria said, her voice deadly quiet. "Age 6. Complaints of ear pain via sign language. Logged as psychosomatic. Age 7. Child indicates ear discomfort during routine check. Prescribed mild pain reliever, no examination." Marcus looked up. It goes on. 17 separate instances over 7 years where Oliver indicated ear pain. Victoria stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the California sun was beginning its descent toward the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. When she spoke, her voice was controlled, but Michael could hear the rage beneath it. 17 times my son told us he was in pain. 17 times he was ignored because it didn't fit the diagnosis you'd already decided on." She turned to face Wells. "Do you know what I'm going to do now?" Wells seemed to shrink in his chair. "Victoria, please." The medical community acted according to established protocols. "I'm going to hold a press conference tomorrow. I'm going to show the world that container with that creature inside it. I'm going to release every medical record, every dismissed complaint, every test that led nowhere, because no one thought to shine a flashlight in my son's ear. That will destroy public confidence in pediatric medicine," Wells protested. "Good," Victoria said flatly. "If that confidence is built on arrogance and assumptions, it deserves to be destroyed." "Mom," Oliver said softly, removing his headphones for a moment. "Can we not fight right now? My head hurts from all the new sounds." Victoria immediately returned to her son's side, her anger temporarily set aside. "Of course, sweetheart. We should get you somewhere quieter." She looked at Michael. "What should we do? How do we help him adjust?" Michael moved closer, keeping his voice low and calm. "The auditory system needs time to calibrate. Think of it like eyes adjusting to bright light after being in darkness. Oliver's brain has to learn to process and filter sounds. Quiet environments at first, gradually increasing exposure. Speech therapy will be essential, and probably some form of auditory processing therapy." "Will you help?" Oliver asked, looking directly at Michael. "You understand. You don't treat me like I'm broken." The question hung in the air. Michael glanced at Victoria, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. "Mr. Torres has his own job," Wells interjected, "and his own son to consider." "I'll pay you," Victoria said suddenly. "Whatever you want. Name your price." Michael shook his head. "I don't want your money." "Everyone wants money," Victoria said, but there was curiosity in her tone now, rather than cynicism. "I want to help Oliver because it's the right thing to do," Michael replied. "And because—" he hesitated, then continued, "because for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Something my wife would have been proud of." Victoria studied him for a long moment. "Your wife? Marcus mentioned she died. I'm sorry." "Thank you." Michael turned to Oliver. If your mom agrees I can come by in the evenings after my regular work, we can work on adjusting to sounds together. My son Noah is only a year younger than you. Maybe you could be friends. Oliver's face lit up. A friend. A real friend. The hope in his voice was heartbreaking. Victoria's expression softened further. Marcus, she said, run a complete background check on Mr. Torres. Deeper than the employment screening. I want to know everything. She held up a hand as Michael started to protest. Not because I don't trust you, because I need to know who's going to be spending time with my son. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. I have nothing to hide, Michael said simply. My life is an open book. A sad book maybe, but an open one. Marcus was already typing on his tablet. I'll have a full report within 2 hours. Wells stood gathering what remained of his dignity. Victoria, I understand you're upset. You have every right to be. But please, let's handle this privately. Going public will create chaos. Chaos might be exactly what the medical establishment needs, Victoria replied. How many other children are suffering because doctors are too arrogant to consider simple solutions? This was a 1 in a million case, Wells protested. Was it? Michael interjected. Or was it a case that no one looked for because it was easier to accept the initial diagnosis? How would we know the difference if no one ever checks? Wells had no answer for that. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity. Oliver was taken to his room, a sprawling suite that had been specially designed for a deaf child. Visual alarms, vibrating notification screens everywhere for written communication. All of it suddenly unnecessary. Michael sat with him, teaching him to identify different sounds. That's the air conditioning, he would say, speaking slowly and clearly while also signing. That's a car outside. That's your heartbeat. Oliver absorbed everything with the intense focus of someone discovering a new world. What's that sound? He asked, pointing toward the window. Michael listened. Birds. Those are birds singing. Birds make sound. Oliver's eyes were wide with wonder. What else makes sound? Everything, Michael said, smiling. The whole world is full of sound. Rain, wine, footsteps, laughter. Music, Oliver. Wait until you hear music. What's music? The question stopped Michael cold. How did you explain music to someone who had never heard it? It's sounds arranged in patterns that make you feel things. Happy, sad, excited. It's like art for your ears. Oliver considered this. Can you show me? Michael pulled out his phone, then hesitated. What should be someone's first experience with music? He scrolled through his playlist past the rock and pop until he found something simple and beautiful, Pachelbel's Canon in D. Close your eyes, he said, signing as he spoke. Just listen. He played the music at low volume, watching Oliver's face transform as the strings began their gentle progression. The boy's mouth opened slightly, his breathing slowed, and a single tear traced down his cheek. It's beautiful, Oliver whispered. It's like how the sunset looks, but in my ears. Michael had to turn away to compose himself. In another room, he could hear Victoria, on a conference call, her voice sharp and commanding, as she arranged what was sure to be a media firestorm. Marcus was in the security office, his background check on Michael undoubtedly uncovering every detail of his life, from his heroism as a nurse to the depths of his grief after Sarah's death. But in this room, there was just a boy discovering sound, and a man remembering what it felt like to make a difference. A knock on the door interrupted them. Noah stood in the doorway, looking uncertain. Marcus was behind him. Your son, Marcus said simply. You listed him as your emergency contact. When you didn't pick him up from after-school care, they called. I took the liberty of bringing him here. Dad. Noah's voice was worried. Are you okay? The scary man said you were helping someone. I'm not scary, Marcus protested, looking mildly offended. Michael stood and embraced his son. I'm fine, buddy. Better than fine. Noah, this is Oliver. Oliver, this is my son, Noah. The two boys studied each other with the frank assessment of children. Noah noticed the headphones around Oliver's neck, the way he watched faces intently, the slight uncertainty in his posture. Hi, Noah said simply. Dad says you just learned how to hear. That's really cool. Oliver smiled shyly. Hi, your dad is nice. He helped me. He's good at helping, Noah agreed. He used to help people all the time before. He trailed off, glancing at his father. Before my mom died, Oliver supplied matter-of-factly. My dad died before I was born. We're both sad sometimes. Noah blinked, then grinned. Yeah, we are. Do you like video games? I don't know. Do they have sound? The best ones do. Come on, I'll show you. And just like that, the two boys were friends. Michael watched them go to Oliver's play area, Noah chattering away about different games, while Oliver listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking him to repeat something or explain a sound. Your son is good with him, Marcus observed, his tone thoughtful. Noah's been through loss. He understands that different doesn't mean less than. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, the background check came back clean. Cleaner than most. Commendations for bravery at Denver General. Saved 6 people from a burning building in 2015. Lost your wife in the Aurora Theater shooting in 2018. Model citizen, devoted father, no debt except the car loan, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. You sound disappointed, Michael said wryly. I'm paid to be suspicious. It's disconcerting when someone is exactly who they appear to be. Marcus paused. My daughter is deaf. Michael turned to look at him, surprised by the admission. She's 22 now, Marcus continued. Lives in Washington, D.C. with her mother. I left when she was 12. Couldn't handle it. The silence. The feeling that I couldn't protect her from a world that would always see her as disabled. He watched the boys playing. I'm not proud of it. But seeing what you did today, seeing Oliver here for the first time, it makes me wonder what else I was wrong about. Before Michael could respond, Victoria appeared in the doorway. She had changed from her business suit into jeans and a simple sweater, and the transformation was striking. Without the armor of her professional attire, she looked younger, more vulnerable. The press conference is set for tomorrow at 2, she announced. Every major outlet will be there. She looked at the boys and her expression softened. They're getting along. Kids are adaptable, Michael said. They don't carry all the baggage we do. Victoria moved into the room, sitting down on Oliver's bed. Mr. Torres, Michael, I owe you an apology. When I first saw you with Oliver, I assumed the worst. I've become so used to protecting him, controlling his environment, that I forgot that sometimes help comes from unexpected places. You don't owe me anything, Michael said. You're a mother protecting her child. I understand that completely. Do you? Victoria looked at him intently. Because from what I've learned about you today, you seem to understand a great deal about loss, about protection, about the failures of systems we're supposed to trust. Michael sat down in a chair across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. I understand that when you lose someone you love to circumstances beyond your control, you either become consumed by the need to control everything, or you learn to let go. I've tried both. Neither works perfectly, but letting go hurts less in the long run. And yet you didn't let go today. You saw something everyone else missed and you acted on it. That wasn't about control. That was about compassion. Victoria was quiet for a moment, watching her son laugh at something Noah was showing him on the screen. It was the first time she'd heard him laugh with sound. Will you help me? She asked suddenly. Not just with Oliver's adjustment, but with what comes next, the foundation I want to create, the changes that need to happen in how we approach pediatric hearing loss. I need someone who understands both the medical side and the human side. Michael considered the offer. I have a job. It's not much, but it's stable, and Noah needs stability. I'll triple your current salary, full benefits, flexible hours so you can be there for Noah, and both boys can attend the same school if you'd like. I have connections at several excellent private schools that would accommodate both their needs. It's not about the money. No, Victoria agreed. It's about purpose. It's about taking the worst thing that ever happened to you and finding a way to prevent it from happening to others. Your wife died because no one could save her. But you saved my son today. Imagine how many other children you could save. The boys' laughter filled the room again. Oliver was trying to pronounce something on the screen, and Noah was patiently helping him sound it out. They looked like they'd known each other for years rather than minutes. Michael thought of Sarah, of what she would say. The answer came immediately in her voice, as clear as if she were standing beside him. Say yes, you stubborn fool. This is why you're still here. Okay, he said quietly. I'll help. Victoria's smile transformed her face completely. For a moment, she wasn't a CEO or a billionaire or a woman who controlled global healthcare technology. She was just a mother whose child had been given a miracle. Thank you, she said simply. That evening, as the sun set over Silicon Valley, two families that had been broken in different ways sat together in the Chen Estate's kitchen, eating pizza and learning to navigate their new reality. Oliver practiced saying words delighting in each new sound. Noah appointed himself as Oliver's guide to the hearing world. Marcus, usually stoic and distant, actually cracked a smile when Oliver successfully pronounced his name. Victoria allowed herself to relax for the first time in years, watching her son experience joy without reservation. And Michael Torres, who had thought his capacity for healing died, with his wife discovered that sometimes life offers second chances in the most unexpected ways. The press conference was tomorrow. The medical establishment would be shaken. Thousands of children would be helped. Two families would slowly merge into something new and beautiful. Love unexpected and undeniable would grow between a billionaire CEO and a maintenance man who had saved her son. But tonight, in a kitchen filled with laughter and the sound of Oliver Chen discovering his voice, none of that mattered. There was only this moment, this miracle, this proof that sometimes the simplest answer is the right one, and that compassion can accomplish what technology cannot. Outside, the California night settled over Atherton like a blanket, peaceful and full of promise. And inside the Chen estate, for the first time in 10 years, there was no silence. Only the sound of hope, tentative, but growing stronger with every word Oliver learned to speak. The revolution had begun, not with fanfare or grand declarations, but with a father's kindness, a mother's fierce love, and a boy's first word, Mom. It was enough. It was everything. Sharana, the Ritz-Carlton in San Francisco's ballroom, had hosted presidents, tech moguls, and Nobel laureates, but rarely had it seen the kind of media frenzy that descended on March 15th at 2 p.m. Every major news outlet was present: CNN, Fox, NBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, TechCrunch, Wired. The room hummed with anticipation and the quiet whir of camera equipment. Victoria Chen walked onto the stage in a simple black dress, no jewelry, her hair pulled back in an unadorned ponytail. The contrast to her usual power suits was deliberate and striking. Beside her walked Oliver, wearing noise-canceling headphones but clearly alert and engaged. Michael Torres followed, uncomfortable in the borrowed suit but determined to support them both. Good afternoon, Victoria began, her voice steady and clear. 10 years ago, I gave birth to a beautiful boy who couldn't hear, or so I was told. I spent the next decade and $12 million seeking help from the finest medical institutions in the world: Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, the Charité in Berlin. Every specialist confirmed the same diagnosis: profound sensorineural hearing loss, irreversible, incurable. She paused, letting the words sink in. They were all wrong. The room erupted in whispers. Victoria raised her hand for silence. My son was deaf because a parasitic larva had lodged itself in his ear canal when he was an infant. For 10 years, this creature lived inside my child, blocking all sound from reaching his eardrum. And for 10 years, not one doctor, not one specialist, not one of the dozens of experts I consulted, thought to look in his ear with a simple otoscope. She held up the specimen container. The larva, preserved now, but still visible, appeared on the massive screens behind her. Several people in the audience gasped. This was removed 3 days ago, not by a doctor, not by a specialist, but by Michael Torres, a maintenance worker at my home, a former emergency room nurse who did what million-dollar machines and renowned physicians couldn't or wouldn't do. He looked, he saw, he acted. Victoria turned to Oliver. My son would like to say something. Oliver stepped forward to the microphone, removing his headphones. The room fell completely silent. Hello, he said, his voice still uncertain, but growing stronger. My name is Oliver Chen. 3 days ago, I heard my mother's voice for the first time. I heard birds singing. I heard music. He paused, gathering courage. I want to thank Mr. Torres for seeing me. Not seeing a problem to solve or a case to study, just seeing a kid who needed help. The emotional weight in the room was palpable. Several reporters were visibly moved. Victoria returned to the microphone. Oliver's medical records show 17 instances over 7 years where he complained of ear pain. Each time it was dismissed as behavioral issues related to his deafness. Each time a simple examination could have changed everything. She clicked a remote and the screens behind her filled with data. In the United States alone, approximately 2 to 3 out of every 1,000 children are born with detectable hearing loss. That's nearly 11,000 children per year. How many of them might have treatable physical causes that are being overlooked because we've become too dependent on advanced technology and too arrogant to perform basic examinations? A reporter raised her hand. Mrs. Chen, are you suggesting that modern medicine has failed these children? I'm stating it as fact, Victoria replied, and I take responsibility for my part in it. My company, MedTech Innovations, has contributed to the problem. We've created AI diagnostic tools that doctors rely on without question. We've promoted efficiency over thoroughness, technology over human observation. That changes today. She clicked the remote again. A new logo appeared, the Oliver Foundation. I'm committing $500 million of my personal wealth to establish the Oliver Foundation. Its mission is simple: ensure every child with hearing loss receives comprehensive examination, starting with the basics before moving to complex diagnostics. We will provide free screening treatment and support to families regardless of their economic status. Another reporter stood. Who will run this foundation? Michael Torres has agreed to serve as executive director, Victoria announced. His experience, both medical and personal, makes him uniquely qualified to ensure we never lose sight of the human element in medicine. The questions came fast and furious after that. Michael fielded the medical queries with quiet competence while Victoria handled the business and policy aspects. Oliver sat between them, occasionally whispered to by one or the other, a small smile on his face, as he experienced his first press conference with the ability to hear it. But not everyone was pleased. 2 hours after the press conference, Dr. Harrison Wells sat in his Palo Alto office, watching his career implode in real time. His phone hadn't stopped ringing. The board of directors of MedTech Innovations wanted an emergency meeting. The California Medical Board had announced an investigation. 3 malpractice lawyers had already left messages. His secretary knocked tentatively. Dr. Wells, there's a group here to see you. Doctors Patterson, Kumar, and Mitchell. The 3 doctors who entered represented some of the Bay Area's most prestigious medical institutions. Dr. Patricia Patterson was chief of pediatrics at Stanford Children's Hospital. Dr. Ravi Kumar headed the audiology department at UCSF. Dr. Jennifer Mitchell was the lead researcher at the Hearing and Speech Institute of Northern California. Harrison, Patricia said without preamble, "What the hell happened?" "A statistical anomaly," Wells replied weakly. "One case out of thousands?" "One case that's gone viral," Kumar interrupted. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to public trust? I've had 12 families demand complete reevaluation of their children's diagnoses just this afternoon." "And they should," a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Michael Torres standing there, having somehow gotten past security. "You shouldn't be here," Wells said. "I'm here because Oliver asked me to deliver a message." Michael replied, entering the room. "He wanted you to know he forgives you." The words hung in the air like an accusation. "He forgives you," Michael continued, "because he's 10 years old and hasn't learned to hold grudges yet. But I want you to understand something. That boy spent a decade in silence, not because of some cosmic misfortune, but because of systemic arrogance. Each of you represents institutions that prioritize protocols over patience, technology over observation, efficiency over thoroughness. That's unfair," Mitchell protested. "We follow evidence-based medicine." "You follow assumptions," Michael countered. "Once a diagnosis is made, especially in a prestigious institution, by a respected physician, it becomes gospel. Who's going to challenge it? Who's going to risk their careers suggesting that maybe, just maybe, everyone before them was wrong?" Patterson leaned forward. "What do you want from us, Mr. Torres?" "Change," Michael said simply. "Real change. Not just PR damage control or updated protocols that everyone will ignore in 6 months. I want you to remember that your patients are people, not cases. That sometimes the most advanced technology in the world can't replace a doctor who actually looks at their patient. Kumar stood up. You think you've won something here, but all you've done is undermine public confidence in medicine. Good, Michael replied. Blind confidence is dangerous. Questions save lives. Doubt saves lives. Humility saves lives. If this makes even one doctor stop and think, what if I'm wrong? Then Oliver's 10 years of silence weren't wasted. He turned to leave, then paused. The Oliver Foundation will be conducting free screenings at community centers across the Bay Area starting next month. You're welcome to volunteer. You might learn something. After he left, the four doctors sat in silence for a moment. He's not wrong, Patricia said quietly. When was the last time any of us did a basic physical examination before ordering an MRI? None of them had an answer. Meanwhile, at Sunnyvale Elementary School, Oliver Chen was experiencing his first day in a mainstream classroom. The noise-canceling headphones helped, but he was still overwhelmed by the sheer volume of 24 other children existing in one space. The scraping of chairs, the rustling of papers, the whispered conversations, the teacher's voice bouncing off the walls, it was sensory chaos. At lunch, a group of older kids cornered him in the playground. Hey, robot boy, one of them taunted. Say something funny. Oliver tried to ignore them, but they formed a circle around him. Come on, talk. We saw you on YouTube. You sound like a broken computer. Leave him alone, Noah Torres said, pushing through the circle to stand beside Oliver. Oh, look, robot boy has a bodyguard. Another kid laughed. That's when Oliver noticed something. The biggest bully, the one who'd started it all, kept touching his right ear. It was subtle, probably unconscious, but Oliver recognized it immediately. He'd done the same thing for years. Your ear hurts, Oliver said, his voice still unclear, but determined. The bully stopped laughing. What? Your ear? It hurts. You keep touching it? So what? Oliver pulled out his phone where Michael had helped him save a photo of the larva that had been removed from his ear. He showed it to the bully. This was in my ear for 10 years. That's why I couldn't hear. That's why I talk funny. But someone helped me. Someone can help you too. The bully stared at the image, his bravado crumbling. That was inside you. Oliver nodded. It didn't hurt much, just sometimes, but it stopped me from hearing everything beautiful in the world. Music, voices, birds. He looked directly at the bully. My mom runs a foundation now. Free checkups. You should come. The transformation was immediate. The bully's aggression melted into curiosity, then something approaching fear. You really think something's wrong with my ear? Maybe, maybe not, but it's worth checking, right? The circle of children dispersed, but the bully lingered. My name's Tyler, he said quietly. Sorry I called you robot boy. It's okay, Oliver replied. I am learning to talk better. Every day is better. That afternoon, Tyler's mother received a call from the school nurse, who had examined the boy at Oliver's insistence. There was indeed something in his ear-impacted cerumen that had been building up for months, causing pain and mild hearing loss. It was removed easily, but the nurse made a point of telling Tyler's mother about the Oliver Foundation and the importance of regular checkups. Word spread quickly through the school. Oliver went from being a target to being something of a hero. Children who had hidden their own struggles began approaching him. A girl with a speech impediment, a boy with a lazy eye, a teacher who confided that her own daughter had hearing problems. Oliver didn't have solutions for all of them, but he had something more valuable: understanding. He knew what it was like to be different, to be dismissed, to be overlooked. And now he had a voice to speak for those who didn't. 3 weeks after the press conference, the Oliver Foundation held its first free screening event at a community center in East San Jose, an area where many families couldn't afford regular medical care. Michael had expected maybe 50 people to show up. Over 300 families arrived. Victoria had mobilized resources with her characteristic efficiency. Medical volunteers from across the Bay Area, many of them shamed or inspired by recent events, staffed examination stations. Basic equipment, otoscopes, audiometers, tympanometers filled the gymnasium. But more importantly, there was a new approach. Every examination began with a simple question. Tell me about your child, not their diagnosis. Tell me about them. Parents who had been shuffled through the medical system for years suddenly found themselves being heard. Stories poured out, frustrations, fears, small observations that had been dismissed as irrelevant. By the end of the day, they had identified 12 children with correctable hearing issues. 7 had severe earwax impaction. 3 had foreign objects lodged in their ear canals. 1 had a perforated eardrum that had gone unnoticed. And 1, a 4-year-old girl named Maria, had a condition almost identical to Oliver's, a small insect that had crawled into her ear months ago and died, creating a complete blockage. Michael removed it himself, with Oliver standing beside him, holding the little girl's hand and telling her in his improving voice that everything would be okay, that the world was about to become so much bigger and more beautiful. When Maria heard her mother's voice clearly for the first time in months, when she spoke her first clear words, Oliver cried. Happy tears he signed to Michael, who was crying too. Victoria watched from the side, managing logistics and fielding calls from media and donors, but her eyes kept returning to Michael. The way he knelt to be at eye level with each child. The way he explained everything in terms they could understand. The way he treated the poorest families with the same respect he'd shown her. You love him, Marcus said quietly, appearing beside her with his usual stealth. Victoria didn't deny it. It's complicated. Love usually is. But complicated doesn't mean wrong. He's an employee. There's a power imbalance. And we both have children to consider. Marcus snorted softly. You're overthinking it. The boys are already brothers in everything but name. You and Michael orbit each other like binary stars. Stop analyzing and start feeling. Since when did you become a relationship counselor? Since I watched that man give your son something you couldn't buy with all your billions. And since I watched you become someone different around him. Someone better. That evening, as volunteers packed up equipment and families headed home, with new hope, Oliver and Noah sat on the community center steps, sharing a bag of chips. Your mom likes my dad, Noah said matter-of-factly. Your dad likes my mom too. Oliver replied, his speech clearer every day. Think they'll get married? Oliver considered this. Maybe. Would that make us brothers? I guess so. That would be cool. Yeah, Oliver agreed. That would be cool. Inside, Michael was helping an elderly volunteer pack up supplies when Victoria approached. Can we talk? She asked. Of course. She led him outside, where the California evening was painting the sky in purples and golds. They stood by her Tesla, neither quite sure how to begin. Michael, she started, then stopped. For someone who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals, she seemed suddenly uncertain. What we're building here, the foundation, it's important. It's going to help thousands of children. I know, but I'm worried that I'm building it for the wrong reasons, or rather additional reasons. Michael waited, patient as always. I'm developing feelings for you, Victoria said in a rush, as if the words were a bitter medicine, best swallowed quickly, which is inappropriate and complicated and probably a terrible idea, but I've learned recently that ignoring obvious truths can have devastating consequences. Michael was quiet for a long moment, then said, After Sarah died, I didn't think I'd ever feel anything again. I functioned. I took care of Noah. I went through the motions. But when I saw Oliver that first time, something woke up. And when I see you, not the CEO, not the billionaire, but you, the mother who would move heaven and earth for her son, the woman who admits when she's wrong and fights to make it right, I feel things I thought were dead forever. So what do we do? Victoria asked, vulnerability clear in her voice. We take it slow. We put the kids first. We keep building something that matters, and we see where it leads. Victoria smiled, the expression transforming her face. I can work with that. 6 months passed. The Oliver Foundation expanded to 7 states. They had screened over 10,000 children and identified nearly 400 with treatable hearing conditions. The medical establishment, initially resistant, began adopting new protocols that emphasized basic physical examination before advanced diagnostics. Medical schools started teaching the Oliver method, a return to foundational clinical skills. Oliver himself had made remarkable progress. His speech, while still carrying a unique cadence, was clear and confident. He had joined the school choir, played piano at the winter concert, and even won second place in a spelling bee. But more importantly, he had found his voice in every sense of the word. He spoke at medical conferences, a small boy on huge stages, telling rooms full of doctors that the most advanced technology in the world couldn't replace actually looking at and listening to patients. He visited children in hospitals, sharing his story and giving hope to families who had been told there was none. Noah had grown too, from a boy carrying grief to one who had learned to transform pain into purpose. He and Oliver were inseparable, two boys who had lost parents but found brotherhood. They started a YouTube channel called The Sound Brothers, where they reviewed music, movies, and video games from Oliver's unique perspective of someone experiencing audio for the first time. Michael and Victoria's relationship evolved slowly, carefully. Coffee meetings became lunches, lunches became dinners, always with the boys at first, then occasionally alone. They talked about loss and hope, about the danger of walls and the courage required to tear them down. Their first kiss happened at the Foundation's one-year anniversary gala in a quiet corner of the hotel balcony, while inside Oliver played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata for an audience of donors and dignitaries. It was soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. "Is this okay?" Victoria whispered against his lips. "More than okay," Michael replied. Marcus, watching from the doorway, allowed himself a rare, genuine smile and quietly ensured no one disturbed them. The gala itself was a triumph. They had raised $30 million in additional funding. 3 more states had committed to mandatory basic ear examinations for all children diagnosed with hearing issues. The FDA had issued new guidelines. The American Academy of Pediatrics had formally endorsed the Foundation's protocols, but the real victory was smaller, more personal. Dr. Harrison Wells approached Michael during the reception. He looked older, humbled by the events of the past year. "Mr. Torres," he began formally, then stopped. "Michael, I owe you an apology. More than that, I owe Oliver an apology." "Oliver forgave you a long time ago," Michael replied. "I know. That almost makes it worse." Wells paused. "I wanted you to know that I've volunteered at the Foundation's clinics every weekend for the past 4 months. I've relearned things I'd forgotten. How to really examine a patient. How to listen not just to symptoms, but to stories. You were right. I had become so dependent on technology that I forgot the most important tool in medicine is observation. What matters is that you remember now," Michael said, extending his hand. Wells shook it gratefully. "I also wanted you to know that I've recommended to the board that MedTech Industries restructure its entire diagnostic division. We're going to build AI that enhances human observation rather than replacing it, and I'd like the Foundation to be our primary consulting partner." It was a victory, but Michael found he didn't feel triumphant, just satisfied that things were moving in the right direction. The evening's highlight came when Oliver took the stage, not to play piano, but to speak. He stood at the podium, no longer needing noise-canceling headphones, and looked out at the audience of hundreds. "1 year ago, I lived in silence." He began, his voice clear and strong. "Not because I was born that way, but because no one looked close enough to see the truth." Michael Torres looked. He saw me not as a medical mystery or a problem to solve, but as a kid who was hurting. And because he looked, because he cared enough to really see my whole world change. He paused, finding Michael and Victoria in the crowd, Noah beside them. "But this isn't really about me. It's about all the children who are waiting for someone to really look at them, to see past the diagnoses and the labels and the assumptions. Every child deserves to be heard, whether they can physically hear or not. Every child deserves to have someone fight for them." The audience was transfixed. This 11-year-old boy, who had spent most of his life in silence, was now commanding a room with his words. "My mom once told me that technology can do amazing things, but it can't replace human compassion." Michael proved that true. He didn't need $1 million machine to help me. He needed to care. And that's what the Oliver Foundation is really about. Not just fixing ears or restoring hearing. It's about remembering that medicine is about people helping people. He raised his hand in the sign for "I love you," a gesture that had once been his only way to communicate. "Thank you for seeing us," he said, and the room erupted in applause. Later that night, after the gala had ended, and the boys had fallen asleep in the back of Victoria's Tesla, Michael and Victoria stood on the beach in Pacifica, watching the moon paint silver paths on the water. "I never expected this," Victoria said softly. "Any of it. Oliver Hearing, the Foundation, you." Life rarely goes according to plan. Michael replied, his arm around her shoulders. Sarah used to say that the best things in life are the ones you never saw coming. She sounds like she was wise. She was. She would have liked you. Even though I'm a type A control freak CEO, especially because you're a type A control freak CEO who learned to let go. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the waves. In the car, the boys slept on Oliver's head, on Noah's shoulder brothers, in everything that mattered. I love you, Victoria said suddenly, the words surprising her as much as him. I know it's only been a year, and it's complicated, and there are a million reasons why this shouldn't work, but I love you. Michael turned to face her fully. I love you too, and yes, it's complicated, but the best things usually are. So what do we do now? Now we go home, we tuck our boys in, we keep building something that matters, and we take it one day at a time. Victoria smiled, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt complete. Not perfect perfection was an illusion she no longer chased, but complete, whole, ready for whatever came next. 1 year later, on a small beach in Monterey, Michael Torres and Victoria Chen were married in a simple ceremony attended by family and close friends. Oliver and Noah served as ring bearers, their faces bright with joy as their parents made official what had been true for months: they were a family. Marcus walked Victoria down the aisle, having become something between a friend and the father figure she'd never had. Dr. Wells attended along with dozens of families whose children had been helped by the foundation. Even Tyler, the former bully, who had become one of Oliver's closest friends, was there with his family. In his vows, Michael spoke about second chances, about finding light in darkness, about the courage to love again after loss. Victoria spoke about walls and bridges, about the difference between controlling life and embracing it, about finding strength in vulnerability. But it was Oliver who gave the most memorable speech at the reception. 2 years ago, I couldn't hear anything, he said, his voice now confident and clear. I couldn't hear my mom tell me she loved me. I couldn't hear birds or music or laughter. But even in the silence, I could feel love. I knew my mom loved me even though I couldn't hear her say it. And when Michael came into our lives, I felt a new kind of love. The kind that doesn't need words or sounds. The kind that shows up and pays attention and cares even when caring is hard. He looked at Noah, his brother, in every way that mattered. And I got a brother who taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about choosing to be there for each other. Then he looked at the crowd, many of whom were wiping away tears. But the most important thing I learned is this: miracles aren't always big and dramatic. Sometimes they're small and quiet. Sometimes a miracle is just someone caring enough to really look, to really see, to really listen, even to silence. He raised his glass of apple juice. To family, to second chances, to the sound of love. The room erupted in cheers and applause. And as Michael and Victoria kissed, as Noah and Oliver high-fived, as the sun set over the Pacific painting, the sky in shades of gold and rose, there was a sense that sometimes, against all odds, broken things can be made whole again. The Oliver Foundation continued to grow, eventually becoming a national organization that revolutionized pediatric hearing care. But its true legacy was smaller and more personal: the thousands of children who could hear because someone bothered to look, the families who found hope when they had none. And the proof that sometimes the most advanced solution is the simplest one: love, attention, care, the willingness to see people not as problems to be solved, but as human beings who deserve compassion. In the end, Oliver Chen's decade of silence had not been wasted. It had been transformed into a voice that spoke for those who couldn't speak for themselves, a foundation that remembered the human and humanitarian, and a family that proved that the best things in life rarely come in the packages we expect. And somewhere, perhaps, Sarah Torres was smiling, knowing that her husband had found his way back to healing, back to hope, back to love. That kindness, even the smallest gesture, really could change a life. Or in this case, thousands of lives. The world was full of sound now for Oliver and for so many others. But more importantly, it was full of people who had learned to listen. Really listen. Not just to words or sounds, but to the silent cries for help that too often go unheard. That was the real miracle. Not the technology or the money or the medical breakthroughs, but the simple revolutionary act of paying attention. of seeing, of caring, of remembering that behind every diagnosis, every case file, every statistic, there's a human being waiting for someone to notice they're in pain. Michael Torres had noticed, and in noticing, he had changed everything. The sound of the waves continued long into the night, a rhythm as old as the earth itself, carrying the laughter of two families, made one the joy of boys who were brothers, the quiet contentment of love found in unexpected places. And in that sound was a promise that as long as there were people willing to look to see to care, miracles would continue to happen. One child at a time, one family at a time, one small act of kindness at a time. The silence had been broken, and the world would never be the same.